Within the past few years, we've seen the full extent of what young people can accomplish through inclusive, youth-driven movements. And we can clearly see this within the most recent presidential election in 2020, where youth voter turnout, they were able to come out in record numbers. In fact, according to Circle, which is the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement, 53% of voting eligible young people ages 18 to 29 turned out to cast a ballot. This was a significant increase to the previous presidential election, where youth voter turnout in 2016 was only 42%. This recent election, we were able to make significant impacts and big differences, and the participation from youth of color was one of the defining elements of this election.
He's completely right, and this just goes to show that when young people see something wrong with the system, we waste no time to take action. We organize, we educate, and most importantly, we don't give up. The top issues prioritized by young voters this past year was effective climate policy that looked to combat our aggressively changing climate, as well as major social justice reform. So if we want to battle the effects of our world's greatest crisis, climate change, on a global scale and at home in our communities, we must prioritize these powerful young voices and vulnerable communities in order to accelerate climate action and climate justice.
Hi, my name is Armon Alex.
And my name is Maggie Peacock.
And between the two of us, we are both young environmental leaders, sharing a similar story of fighting for climate action right now. Now, to be straightforward with you all and to immediately break down the common misleading stereotype, we are not just young climate activists just because we've got all of this time on our hands. In fact, that couldn't be further from the truth. The reality of our situation is that we'd much rather live young, worryless lives, focusing on school, after-school activities, homework, undergrad work, work in general, our friends or our family at home. But the cards have been dealt, and our hand clearly shows that if we're not willing to fight for our generation and generations to come after ours in the future, then no one will.
And by now, we should all know that climate change affects us in more ways than we can imagine. The impacts predicted by scientists decades ago are happening right now. And these symptoms extend well beyond just an increase in temperature. They are negatively affecting vulnerable communities and ecosystems here in the United States and around the world. Things we hold as necessities, food, water, energy, transportation, human health, wildlife, agriculture, they are all experiencing the dire effects of the changing climate.
And with the changing climate in mind, we can see how the side effects like rising sea levels are endangering coastal communities, altering entire coastlines, and how because the ocean is just simply taking in way too much CO2, it's creating things like dead zones and ocean acidification. How because of these warming waters, entire fish populations are migrating to cooler areas. And that's definitely destroying ecosystems and altering economies where they're heavily dependent on the fisheries. Those economies are being negatively impacted as well.
And a recent report by the World Wildlife Fund shows that we've lost a staggering 68% of wildlife since 1970. Along with biodiversity loss, we've seen an increase of severe weather patterns threaten hundreds of thousands of lives in recent years.
The Australian wildfires, the Texas winter storm, the exponential disastrous hurricanes, and so on and so much more. We simply don't have enough time to list every disaster that has ended in horrible fatalities. The individuals that are fighting for climate action right now are the same individuals that are fighting for their very livelihoods.
And these people that will exponentially see the effects of climate change in their lifetime are young people like Armon and I. These are the same people that are on the front lines of this issue, yet most conversations about how to address it are behind closed doors filled with primarily older white scientists and politicians. Not only is climate change negatively impacting young people overall, it is disproportionately affecting communities of color.
Black, Indigenous, and people of color are being left out of these conversations, regardless of the simple fact that these communities are the most vulnerable and they remain the most at risk, including young people.
And you know what? In order to include a more diverse group into these discussions over climate solutions, we can be inspired by Earth's biodiversity, where all of Earth's living matter, regardless of species differentiation, listen to one another, hear each other, and work together to form functional ecosystems that really exhibit the epitome of diversity.
And it's simple. When young people are heard, they can begin to communicate ideas. You know, the majority of my work is heavily involved with equipping other young environmentalists like myself and Maggie with the tools to be effective communicators, to talk about science, to communicate about climate action. Just recently, I was lucky enough to be invited to be an inaugural member of our city's first ever environmental task force. As a young person of color in this movement, that meant that my collective successes in climate action were finally being recognized. It's amazing how inspirational young people can be whenever they're fighting for something that's much bigger than them, whenever they can rely on others. It's pretty simple that when young people learn to listen and speak to each other, they go out into their communities and they teach. They advocate for action. They listen for solutions. They raise funds. They listen to experts. They collaborate with experts. This example is a testament to how young people like Maggie and I are doing the hard work right now. We are also the experts. And so there's no denying that whenever conversations about climate action and climate solutions take place, we deserve a seat at the table.
And honestly, what we're asking you all is very simple. Actually give us that seat at the table. Let us speak at conferences, committees, and summits, and recognize our collective successes as young environmental leaders. For instance, in my hometown, I've been lucky enough to have teachers and administrators listen to me, my goals, and my mission. As a young elementary student, I founded our school's first student-led organization, and our goal was to raise funds and awareness for endangered wildlife all over the world. And that's exactly what we did. We raised thousands of dollars for organizations across the globe, taught younger students in our school district all about the importance of environmentalism, and inspired not only other students, but teachers too. Yes, we accomplished a lot, but only because I had adults that listened and actually gave me that seat at the table. Because we're both so young, we're incredibly lucky to be standing here today talking about this issue and about the fact that a lot of other young people like us feel like their knowledge and hard work is not being heard.
The message is clear. Help us in raising our voices. Stories like Maggie's and mine are inspirational. Help us by raising our voices. Provide us with the opportunities to help involve ourselves with creating critical environmental legislation and policy.
World leaders have been too excruciatingly slow to create legitimate climate policy, and we need that to change.
And just like Maggie said, we can't help those accomplishments without being present in these conversations.
So to the older generations, if you're thinking about hosting these discussions over climate solutions, keep the younger generation in mind, because we organize,
we educate,
and most importantly,
we don't give up.